Welcome to how IT ops and security convergence drove real world results. Let's begin. And there is a questions pane. I'm working from a hotel room today, so I kind of have collapsed everything, but I'll pull up things as we go and answer questions as we go through. This content may contain forward-looking statements regarding future product plans and development efforts. What this basically means, if I start talking about something in a roadmap, I probably won't today, but I usually do. So they make me do this legal slide. Just know that I'm not the executive vice president of our product team, Mike Adler. I don't get to make product plans and decisions. Just know that if I do talk about a roadmap, product plans and priorities do change. Okay, so who am I? I'm one of 8 head nerds here at Enable. My name is Jason Murphy. I'm the head nerd for N-Central and IT operations. I've been with Enable off and on. I took a 3-year break, but I started at Enable back in 2017, did some cool stuff as a sales engineer, left and did some cool MSP related stuff. And then I came back in 2020 and I've been doing this whole nerd gig and doing cool stuff like webinars with people like Rick over the past 5 years. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Rick, who can give you an introduction. Rick, take it away.
Thanks. My name is Rick Mutzel. I'm the manager of technology for Omega Systems. So we're MSP, MSSP. Funky name. Basically, what it means is I manage our technology stack that we use internally and for customer deliverables. I've been with the company going on 13 years now. So I've got to see lots of growth, lots of changes in technology, and I'm really focused on making sure that we have the best deliverables and the best products that we can offer to our customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. We're going to get right into things, but before I do, I want to let you know I'm going to do a couple commercials here. I'll make it really quick. Is that we're kicking off our first annual Enable Cyber Resilience Summit. Not cybersecurity. We're going to go with resilience. That's happening on October 16th. So if you're in ANZ or Australia, New Zealand, that will kick off around 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Or if you're in the East Coast, US, Canada, that will also happen at 9 a.m. Or if you're in Europe, that will happen at 2 p.m. British Standard Time. Okay, so grab your QR code, register for that. I'm really excited. I know myself and Lewis are going to kick off a really cool talk track. So check that out. Now, one last thing is save the date, because I know Rick is excited for April 13th to the 15th. I know I am as well. We're going to be doing some very, very cool stuff at Empower this year. We're going to kind of flip Empower on its head and do some really kind of cool and new stuff. So if whether you're a business owner or whether you're a technician or technical or non-technical, we'll go with, there is something for everyone. And again, we're going to be doing some certification type stuff around cybersecurity, IT innovation, M&A, a whole bunch of great things. So please check that out. And if you want, because there's no QR code on this screen, you can just Google Enable Empower 2026 and you'll find the link where you can register for that. Now, that's it for commercials. So brief agenda. Rick and I are going to riff on security and IT convergence. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about 3 kind of key takeaways, and we're going to open it up and you can ask questions. If you do have questions along the way, I'm going to kind of open up the questions pane here and there and see what you said. Okay, let me go back one here. Okay, so there is increased digitalization, which has posed risks and challenges. What this basically means is there is a rising increase in IT complexity. So if you are at an MSP or if you are in an IT department, I think you all get this. You know, there is SaaS applications, there are on-prem applications. You have people working from home. You have people working from the office. There is a lot going on. You have things like Microsoft, right? And that poses its own challenges around authentication and everything that happens with managing the Microsoft stack. Now, you can see here that that increase is around 55% of IT professionals say they're struggling to manage SaaS sprawl, right? So anybody can hop on the internet and register for an app, either download it or just use the web version. There's a lot of things going on, and being able to control that is really, really challenging. As well, uh, there are, I mean, newsflash, there's increasing cyber attacks. So 60% of SMB owners state a cybersecurity is a top concern. I know I can't speak for Rick, but when I used to manage cybersecurity for an MSP, it was one of the things that kept me up at night. And growing data management. This is basically data sprawl. So there's a projected CAGR of 25% in the global data volume. Things are growing. I'm sure AI is also helping increase this as well. So it's one of those things that protecting the data is a serious challenge right now as well. Now, we did talk about SaaS applications, which is listed here, but if you go to the very bottom center, if you look at that SMB or mid-market, you had traditional perimeter, right? You endpoints, servers. You typically look at firewalls. The internal on-premise traditional perimeter, and then you had kind of a more modern, right? You had applications, websites. You had things like Azure AD, mobile. But now we have this expanding perimeter. You know, if you're in the certificate business or if you manage certificates, by 2027, those will start expiring over 90 days. I think it's 90 days. I don't correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think they want to make it even less.
yes, they do. It's going to be changing very quickly.
Yeah.
So managing all of that is going to be a challenge, and obviously certificate automation is going to be paramount. But just know that, I mean, this landscape has changed, right? SaaS, and we brought that up, right? Collaboration tools like Teams or Slack or Discord. Being able to ensure your own data residency, right? Like what is most important to your business and keeping that protected. And when you have these kinds of tools, anybody can do sharing, right? So, you have digital supply chain attacks. Um, Obviously, there's the advent of IoT. No, that's not new. I mean, IoT has been kicking around for well over, I would say, close to a decade now. But keeping that under management is a serious challenge as well. Now, I won't go through everything, but I did want to kind of talk about this one as well. Now, one thing I do want to also identify is that maybe you're new to Enable. Maybe you're a co-partner. Maybe you're using one of our tools, or maybe you're not using anything. So I want to do a kind of a quick identification of kind of who we are, right? And you have to think of Enable in three different ways, right? One is endpoint management, the other one is security operations, and the last one is data protection, right? And you can see at the top, manage, secure, recover. And that is what Enable is laser focused on. So when you start breaking some of this down, endpoint management, typical UEM, as we call it, Unified Endpoint Management, or traditionally known as RMM, remote management, right? Patch, vulnerability management, automation. When you start looking at security operations, endpoint protection, EDR, and then you can start layering in things like MDR, XDR, and mail and identity protection. And if you're not familiar with Cove, our data protection product, typical backup, but also disaster and cyber recovery. Also cloud recovery. So if you're wanting to protect those mailboxes, for example, and there's more and more coming on cloud, like, if you're in the Google Workspace, we're going to be able to take care of that as well soon. And then you can see across the bottom all of the things that we can really manage and handle for your business today. Now, again, uncompromised control and security is what we are laser focused on, that manage, secure, and recover. Now, we're going to get into it. So we did a little intro, Rick. Now we're going to talk about the convergence. And what that really starts with is driving culture and organizational change, right? So when you start looking at, we're going to start with people. Probably the toughest part, right, is that in business, we have to hire people and we have to organize those people. And oftentimes we have to drive culture and organizational change. And Rick, I kind of want to start off in, I won't call it ancient history, but you have been doing this a long time. And obviously, so have I. When you look back, right, what kind of prompted, like, you obviously understand that things have changed over the last 5 or 10 or 15 years. And then when did that change occur around, hey, we need to do something new. We now need to do this MSSP thing. And I would say that is kind of a traditional model. Like you're either IT ops MSP or your security ops MSSP. So talk about a little bit about that history and how that kind of came together.
So we were traditional MSP, doing the normal patching, monitoring, up, down, updates, boots on the ground, those kinds of things that a traditional MSP is going to be surfacing and providing as a service. And I want to say roughly 10 years ago, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. We do a fair amount of business in kind of the financial sector, and we're constantly seeing a need for managed networking, managed security, and we wanted to be able to also provide that to our clients that we're doing instead of having them go to a third party vendor. And so we kind of started crafting those service offerings. We put a smart in front of everything, so we call it Smart Secure. That's our managed networking offering, and that was kind of our first kind of getting into that whole MSSP space of delivering managed firewalls, having a SOC to align with that, doing change management controls, doing vulnerability scans, all the things that you kind of see coming down the pike from a regulatory perspective in the financial sector was really our first go at the whole MSSP space. And then it's kind of evolved from that based on customer requests and kind of, we read the tea leaves of what we think is going to be coming down. And as we've continued to expand into different verticals, we're also trying to align our services along with that. And so really kind of seeing and projecting where the space is going, both from regulatory customer requests and then also where do we want to go as an MSP? That has morphed us, we'll say about 10 or so years into that MSSP space.
Perfect. And as we're talking about people and organizational change, when did that start? Pardon me. When did that really kick off for you and Omega in terms of, hey, traditional MSP, but now we got to do something different? And maybe even talk about like how did you put it together?
Yeah, so we kind of put together the core service offering to like here's everything. We want to do everything. So we'll provide you with the firewalls. We're going to provide you with the management platform. We're going to provide you with change management controls. And then we saw a much lower barrier from a price point. Customers also wanted that, but to hit a certain price point, you kind of have to peel back what the core offerings there are versus what's included. And we started crafting different levels of service in that. And then it just continued to expand. And it's one of our core service offerings now. It's almost like you get the normal MSP, like we're an enable partner. So here is enable, and we're going to put in central, and we're going to do patching and monitoring and all that kind of stuff. But really you're getting both. Any kind of net new logo that's coming on is getting both sides of that fence. And then as we continue to expand out from there, it wasn't just managed firewalls, because I really like the slide that you had kind of towards the beginning of, I call that like the security onion. Like here's where we were before with like we need to secure the on-prem resources. And then things like, I don't know, a whole global pandemic occurred, and that whole with, you know, securing that very finite office space, right? Now everybody's global. So that blew everything out of the water. Now, what do we need to secure? And we need to pivot and make sure we have the ability to secure those people. And
Yeah,
then,
and sorry to interrupt. And
yeah,
that was almost like a kick in the pants or an awakening, right? At least from an IT perspective, security perspective as well, because hey, we also need to look after things in this hybrid, and a lot of businesses weren't set up for work from home or what have you. So how do you start managing people, from their home office, from their house, from their kitchen table? I remember just having a flashback of my daughter sitting at a little table in kindergarten, grade one, and just doing her lessons over a laptop. Like it was unreal. And and I think we need to talk about the people part of this. Is like, how did Omega kind of one deal with all of that, but there was now a change, right? You had to adapt. How did you kind of assemble the kind of the team mechanics to be able to one deal with that, but also look after this growing security piece?
we expanded. There's really no other way around, getting all of these moving parts that are kind of aligning with mobile workforce. Kind of going back to that people perspective,
Mm.
the workforce that we're assisting to secure has changed drastically as well. And so we've seen as people have, Apple has done a fantastic job of marketing through the schools. And so kind of what I equate that to is, we again dating myself a bit, like Apple IIe's. You learned in school on an Apple IIe, and then now the kids are learning on iPads, and
Mhm.
they're using Google Workspace. They're not in the Microsoft ecosystem. So when they become employees at a company in a workforce, they want to use what they're used to using. And so that's also shifted. That culture and the people revolving around it is more, I hate the word agile, but like we want to be agile and we want to use what we want and where we want and when we want. And so kind of wrapping the security around the ability to do that, you need to scale or outsource, kind of the two perspectives there of your SOC services. And so if you need to hire people, figuring out all the cogs that go around that and expanding, or outsourcing, and again figuring out how you can scale that as your clients are also scaling. That's always a difficult decision to make. Like, how do we keep up as we're expanding our business on keeping up with all the net new stuff coming in and all the services and the security that kind of go around that? You know, it's great to have visibility with your tool set, but visibility also creates tickets. And so being able to react to that and meet your SLAs is the traditional, we need to scale and make sure that we have either butts and seats to react to those tickets or outsource to somebody that can provide that service for us.
And was that an executive ask, or was this like just an organic transformation internally? Like, or like, one, it's about growth. Like, let's be serious, we're all in business, we all want to grow. But I mean, it's one of those things that, hey, we also need to do right by these businesses, and we need to then protect them. And then taking that MSP model, or IT, we'll call it IT operations, and then converging that. I just want to kind of maybe even go back in history, like when, like how many years ago, maybe you were on the forefront, and maybe it was 10 years ago for you, but when did that actually happen? Was that pre-COVID, during COVID, or post-COVID?
Oh, before COVID.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we've been doing that for a while. From a you you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink kind of thing. Like, we had the service offerings in place and we were having those discussions a long time ago with customers.
Okay.
But I think the page has turned. The news cycles drive that with all the 0 days and all the, you see everybody in the news. You don't want to be in the news. And so that value proposition is an easier sell now than it was the what if this happens. Now it's when is it going to happen? And so you can help drive that change a lot easier now, um, given the news cycles and the proliferation of all of those events that have been occurring in the world.
Right, right. Now, did that change or that adoption again happen organically, and did it actually come down from executive, or was it just again organic? Did it just happen over time?
A little bit of both. So we start to see the need from the organic side of the business of, the sales reps would, hey, do we have a solution for this? Or the customers are asking for this. And we have a really good executive team that we can take those things to. And, one of my objectives in the business is to receive that feedback and kind of do the market analysis and figure out, is this something we can turn into a service offering? How big is the need? And then craft something to fill that, if there actually is something we can do with it.
Yeah, and did you have to redesign things? Like, did you have
Oh
to
yeah,
like do it? Okay, so can you talk
we've
about
had
that?
many iterations.
Yeah, like what does that team dynamic look like? Like, I know when I first, because yes, we were, going back to my MSP portion of my career, is we didn't we had some security offerings, but it wasn't like it was more like bolt on. It wasn't really part of the managed service, right? It was like, oh yeah, I will take care of your EDR. Basically, that was table stakes. But when you wanted like, we were using something like Cisco Umbrella, right, and a few other security tool sets. Um, it felt really kind of disjointed, but then we kind of packaged it all together. But we also had to assemble that back end team, right, to support it. So, can you talk about how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, we had a different architecture and layout than we have now. So through growth, we've expanded rapidly for just number of individuals that we have on the teams. And so when you first kind of start out, it was we have one guy, let's go sell it, and then we'll kind of build out from there. And then as we sold, we continued to expand, and then you need somebody to manage all those people. And so now you're stepping up your game and saying, okay, now we're going to actually make a department out of this, and we
Right.
need to put the administrative staff behind it, we need to put the management staff behind it. And so now you're hiring that, and then we continue to add the different service offerings. And so for like managed network security, that's a different skill set than somebody on like a SOC analyst. And then you have compliance, and that's a different skill set. And then so now you're kind of feeding the buckets of those individual skill sets, and then that gives you the ability to scale those individuals, and then also promote from within. And we've done a really good job, like on the SOC side of things. So we've generally promoted from within. If somebody shows um, through the reviews, like, hey, I'm really interested in the SOC side of things, we'll kind of promote from within. And as those physicians become available, we kind of already have a bench to pull from. That's not to say that we haven't hired externally, if we don't have a skill set that we need right away. Um, but again, as those things change through time, we really try to look from within and kind of promote up the chain.
Okay, perfect. And we're just going to kind of double down on the very last one here. I mean, obviously, you've been doing this a while. I'm sure, yeah, you maybe don't want to talk about the mistakes that get made in business, but there are often mistakes, and you have to kind of pivot and readjust. What's your advice? Like, there's traditional MSPs out there that are again doing kind of like what I did 5 years ago. Is like we're dabbling in security. What advice could you give people around kind of putting all of this together?
If I could do it all over again, I don't know that I would change a whole lot. I think we learned a lot from the mistakes that we made to get to where we are today.
Mhm.
Um, when I go back and kind of look at the different iterations of the security stack as we've kind of evolved, I think the one thing of trying to do it all yourself is great, but it costs a lot of money. And so for somebody just starting out, I would look to, white label or outsource maybe initially, so you can get a full stack that you can deploy, and then have somebody just responsible for the management of that. And then maybe as you grow, you can start to pull pieces of that back in house if you need to, and kind of take more control over it. I guess would be my one big key takeaway.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do here is now we're going to kick off, and I'll just go to the next slide, a poll. And that poll is going to be what's the biggest challenge in driving change across teams in your organization? I'm going to open that up here. Let me just find it. And I'll launch that here now. And that is one, lack of shared goals, two, communication gaps, three, resistance to change, or four, skill or resource limitations. I've actually personally dealt with all four of these, so I wouldn't even know which one to answer on my own.
All of them?
Yes, I would definitely, there should be like all of the above is probably the one I would go with. But if I had to actually pick one, I would say when I tried to make a lot of changes internally, it was resistance to change. I felt that. Um, can you relate to that at all?
Absolutely. Change is generally viewed as a bad thing, and you kind of drive that change doesn't have to be bad. Change can be good, and kind of building that culture internally of things will evolve. Listen, we're in IT. Things change on a daily basis. Like
Right.
change is inevitable, so kind of get on the bandwagon and get used to the change, and doing change properly remove some of those barriers, of thinking the stigma is this is going to be bad.
Right, right. And I used to tell people we are all agents of change. I was trying to do a culture shift as well. Like we all have to change, we all have to modernize, we all have to adapt. And again, I think technicians are very comfortable in like the here and now, and sometimes that change is challenging. All right, so I'm going to close that poll. And we're going to move on here. Let me just make sure everybody can see what I'm seeing. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to talk about number two, process, or if you're in Pennsylvania, I'm sure you say process. So
Process.
there we go. All right. Um, I know how to speak American sometimes. All right. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to kind of double down on transforming workflows and operational models. Yes, we did kind of touch on this, but let's get into some specifics, at least as much as you can, right? Without giving away the secret sauce, of course. But um, transforming workflows and operation models, what did that look like, let's say, just post COVID, right? Like, let's go back to what, 2022? And what have you adjusted over the past 3 years? Obviously, one thing I can tell you is you became a Naval partner, because I remember working with you very early on, and obviously meeting you at our Empower event. But talk about the operational side of Convergence, like bringing this together.
So initially
I know it's a tough one too. So
finding, I guess, the process that we went through was, as always, we start with kind of vendor management, reviewing what's available to us, doing our due diligence on that side, and selecting a vendor. That's very important to us, actually. The vendor relationship, um, is super important. Um, so kind of as we started out, we started looking for different products that we could use to deliver the service. And so as we looked at trying to operationalize those kinds of things, finding something that integrates is also, from our perspective, a requirement, because we can't have people in 18 different platforms trying to make a deliverable. And so that's how we started. Kind of, we like the best of breed, so we look to find the best thing we can, and then working out of those systems as you scale, that becomes kind of a lost cause because you can't work out of all those different things. So
Well, you bring up a really important point is like not only are you converging process, but you're also converging technology, or
right,
at least the process behind the technology, right?
yeah,
Like because again, when I can relate to that because when I was at this very, very large MSP here in Canada, um, even though I'm in Chicago right now, um, when I was at that MSP, we had 79 different vendors, and just we had like four different mail products,
yeah.
like intercode security mail products. It was unreal, and then trying to narrow that down, kind of narrowing the scope of, and because you want to be best in class, not from just a tools perspective, but from a delivery perspective. Because then your support teams, are able to deal with the technology much more efficiently and what have you. Um, Maybe you could talk a little bit about that on your side as well.
Yeah, so on the operations side, kind of we talked about a little bit more about the creating the individual kind of work roles that kind of feed up to like security and compliance.
Mhm.
So when you're first starting out, you typically will have like one person in each one of those roles, or maybe one person that's doing all of those roles. And then as your service offering kind of builds and you scale out, you want to make sure that you have the processes in place for moving between those different departments because they're all interconnected. And so if you've got compliance and GRC finding stuff when they're talking to clients about configuration management and risk management and policy and procedure, somebody needs to action on the things that are actually found. And so having a workflow in place to move items that are found, or make recommendations, even just outside of the SOC, back to account management. You know, this client is, for whatever reason, doesn't want to implement MFA, right? We all got that one client that, like, the CEO can't possibly be bothered with MFA, but they're the biggest target, right? And so you've got 99% of the organization secured, but the guy with the biggest target on his back, you have to be able to go to account management and say, listen, you need to have a conversation. Like, we've already had the discussions, we've given the risks, and they don't want to work through it. And so that becomes more of a relationship management process
Right.
with a client than it is a technical implementation process. And so having the conversations and the escalation processes in place between all of those different departments is very key. Both, again, that goes back to your people, and not just internally, but then also with the clients. Because again, we're going to be changing a lot of things in your environment to meet all of these mitigations that we need to put in place. Change is bad. We need to change that perception with the client as well as internally.
Right, right. I can completely relate to everything you just said. I'm just like visualizing this as you're talking to some of my own history. I want to give the people that are listening something a little kind of tangible use case. So, let me put this in front of you. Kind of like when you first started doing vulnerability scans, and I can relate to this as well because we used Nessus back in the day, and that would become a professional service. How does that happen? Can you talk about what it was then and how do you do it now? Like, because I believe there's probably a transition, something that's more modern, fast, and fluid. Let's use the word agile for the last time. Um, but you know what I mean, right? Like
Yes.
back then it was like you gotta pay me to do something, whereas now is like this I hate using the word table stakes as well, but it's now part of the daily routine. Talk about a little bit of what a day in the life was and is now.
So originally we were checking a box, right?
Mhm.
So we have to do vulnerability scanning. That was a point in time engagement. You got, I mean, everybody's seen a vulnerability report. So you get this thing with a bunch of bad items listed, nobody knows what it is, and so you have a technical review and you come up with a remediation plan and you do that, and then next year you do it all over again. Bringing that forward, it's a continuous model. And if you really start digging into what the regulations are moving towards or are now after these revisions, is vulnerability management is continuous. It can't be checking the box to be once and done per year kind of thing.
Mhm.
You have to do it continuously, and continuously meaning reoccurring, whether that's monthly, quarterly, weekly, whatever that engagement is. The problem with that is you're going to find those problems, and your remediation has to be effective. So if you write a policy and a procedure for vulnerability management, that's based on, we'll say, like risk. And so if you have a CVSS or EPSS score of 8 or above, then I need to remediate it in X amount of days. Great. Sounds perfect on paper, except when you actually have to do it. And now your frequency that you're doing the scans and you're discovering vulnerabilities, your remediation has to match your policy and your procedure. So now I've got 24 hours to remediate all severe or critical vulnerabilities. That becomes unmanageable
Mhm.
almost entirely if you're in a large organization. And
Right.
so taking production systems down every 24 hours for whatever the flavor 0 day is of, that day, you're going to have to, business impact needs to be also incorporated into your risk management policies.
One other question, was remediation a professional service back then, and is it a professional service today?
Back then it was an engagement. So that was kind of a rate. It was scoped out as really a project to do the vulnerability scan and the remediation, professional services. Now it's a service offering. So we include that in, so again, we put smart in front of everything. So we
Mhm.
have like a smart compliance as a service. And so we include vulnerability management in that. And so we will detect those. A customer can choose to incorporate certain amount of hours for remediation in their contract if it's something that's within the scope of, we'll say, normal managed services. So like it's an Adobe update or Windows updates or something like that. We'll generally cover those under the support agreement because those services are kind of included. But as you kind of scope out from there, depending on what the vulnerability is, there may need to still be a scope put in place to perform remediations if a customer doesn't have that within the scope of their support contract.
And okay, so you're making now you're talking like I'm got all these ideas to riff off of. So I'm trying to focus on which one I think what I want to do is actually focus on like just the kind of the transforming of the workflows.
Yeah.
Is this because I know how you guys operate and how efficient you guys are. Is it because you do more automation? Can you talk about how the automation has maybe transformed or allowed your operation to be more efficient? Specifically, just we'll use the use case around vulnerabilities. Like, yes, you're able to identify things much faster. In fact, vulnerability management in Central does a scan every 6 hours. But the other part is the remediation piece because you're doing it as a service. It's part of the compliance package, I believe you said.
Mhm.
Like, how does that look? Like, is it automation that is really the game changer in that respect?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So you can automate to a certain degree, but at some point, depending on what the remediation is and what the detection is, very often there's going to have to be some kind of scheduled downtime. Something's not included in it, or it has to be manual. You have to download firmware. You have to, do firewall or switch upgrades. Your hypervisors need to get, and those kinds of things. The normal things will tend to schedule out,
Hmm.
and get a routine maintenance schedule in place so that you can meet the the patch management policy or the vulnerability remediation policy. So nobody's going to patch hypervisors constantly. Like the business disruption and the business impact to that are too great. And so you come up with a schedule, like we will do this quarterly. And so as the detections come in, if it's deemed to be something that needs to happen right away, then yes, an out of band update or patch can be done.
Okay.
But outside of that, you make a note in your vulnerability detection and say this will be addressed next quarter, and then you review that next quarter to make sure it actually was resolved. Same thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, the same thing happens with networking equipment. Switch firmware updates. You're not going to take down a core switch. I mean, you may have HA, and maybe you can do that. And
Right,
again, depending on the configurations, you can do that. But for an SMB, you're not going to be doing that all the time.
right, right. And obviously, you're not going to do it in the middle of the day. No, it was just one of those things as you were talking. It's like, automation is a huge piece of it, but compliance and also working with your key stakeholder around how this is going to operate is key to this as well.
Yep.
And that, I mean, the very last one you can see on the list here is quantifiable results. Like, how does Omega paint one an operate, let's say, an IT operational picture and also a security operational picture? And is that one picture now? Is it two different pictures?
We have combined those two, and so that compliance as a service offering that I was alluding to has many different components that feed into it. And so we're not managing vulnerable. I mean, we are, but we're not painting that picture of vulnerabilities, configuration, patching, data, like where it resides and what the value of that is. We're pulling all of that together, but we are managing the risk of an environment. And that risk has all of those different puzzle pieces in it. But when you paint that picture to a company, like no CEO or no board really cares about vulnerability management. They don't really care about what version of my hypervisor, has. Right? They want to know what the impact to the business is going to be, and are they willing to accept that risk to not impact business or production and what that dollar amount is going to be. And so that is what the conversation needs to be. So here's how much data you have. If it's compromised, here's how much it will cost you. Is your liability insurance going to cover that? Probably not when you actually add it all up. So there's a conversation to be had about, are you properly insured? Do your policies and procedures meet whatever regulatory body that you are beholden to? And so having that conversation, right? And so putting all of that together to present a risk number, whether that's in dollars and percentages, whatever of that, and then working back from there on how can we make that go down. What the picture you have to paint as an MSSP is that number is being worked on. We're trying to make that number go down. It doesn't really matter what the number is, to be completely honest. The value is reducing that over time because we all want reoccurring revenue. And so the value of those services is reducing the risk and liability to a company.
So while Omega understands the technical risk, right? CVEs, vulnerabilities, let's say poor process, what have you. While you can understand that piece, you paint the picture as business risk, right? And that is more consumable to a leader in business, right? Because that is financial. That is something that really kind of grabs their attention as well. And I won't call it FUD. This is business and nobody wants to lose money. And if you can paint that picture in dollars and cents and come at from it that lens as opposed to a technical lens, right? Because then that just turns into noise. Like, yes, I know I have problems in that, or, I can only budget for so much. But when you start painting that picture around business risk, it now makes more sense, right?
And it also helps drive the remediation, right? And so you get a vulnerability scan and it's 700 pages long. Where do you start? Okay, traditionally, I want to take care of all the critical, and high vulnerabilities. But when you tie all those pieces together to make your remediation efforts as efficient as possible, you may not target all of those the same. And so where your data resides or where your misconfigurations are, coupling all of that together to create a risk that is actually relevant versus I need to drop everything and patch my hypervisors.
Right.
Why? Like, do I actually need to do that right now because of a perceived risk? Or do I actually have data that, if exposed, if this vulnerability is used, will actually impact my business?
Awesome. I wish we could talk on this for another 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but obviously we're allowed the hour here. So we're going to move on to a poll. Okay. So what's your top priority when optimizing workflows? And let me just launch that poll here now. And I'll read it out to you. Okay. One, reducing manual tasks. Two, improving response times. Three, increasing visibility. Or four, enhancing collaboration. Which one would you fall on in terms of your top priority when optimizing workflows?
And that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
I think it depends on which department you're asking. So if you're talking to service desk uh, and operations, I think response time is going to be probably their pick. Um, if you're talking to the automation team and the managed services team, manual tasks is probably very high on their list.
Fair enough.
Again, this goes like I could pick all of them.
Right,
Uh,
right.
Top
All of
management
the
team's going to want collaboration.
yes. Cool. What I'm going to do here now is close that poll. And what we're going to do here is, let me just check the audience view. Okay, perfect. Now let's go into number three, enabling convergence through tools and platforms. And what I do want to get to at this point is, let me just move this over, is enabling convergence through tools and platforms. Obviously, you're one of our best partners, and I always enjoy working with you, Ben, and of course Carl as well. Maybe you could talk about, you know, you don't use enable for everything, and while I wish you would, Rick, we have come to realize that we don't do, everything you need us to. Now, one thing I would like you to do is, what was the role of RMM in your convergence story previous to End Central, and what did End Central kind of do to maybe help complement some of that as well?
Yeah, so as we moved to enable, specifically for RMM, one of the key driving factors was honestly patching. I think enable does an amazing job of the actual patching of endpoints. And so we utilize it in kind of the pieces of the puzzle, right, to put into a risk management strategy. Patching is obviously one of those. And so endpoint patching was huge for us. And I think Enable does a very good job at managing the patching, the schedules, and things along those lines um, for that particular piece of the puzzle.
Well, I had the opportunity to work with you very closely during your selection process when you moved from your incumbent to Enable. What can you talk a little bit about what that strategy was really about? Was it honestly better security posture? Was it maybe an IT operational thing where I just want better outcomes? Can you talk a little bit about, and I don't obviously want to name names or anything like that. That's not fair. But it's one of those things where a little bit of the before and a little bit of the after, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, so again, like I said before, vendor relationship is very important to us. We had little to no vendor relationship with our other vendor, which when we have a problem, we want to be able to get a hold of somebody. So it's MSPs, it's not just impacting one, it's impacting all. So like if my RMM is down or I'm having an issue with something, it's impacting my business to hundreds of clients. And so I want to be able to call somebody and figure that out. And I want to have priority routing if it's something that needs to be done right away. And so having, I do, yes.
Sorry, I'm joking because I know you do. So it's just one of
It's
those
very
things.
important, from an MSP perspective. And so having the relationship, having the ability to reach out to somebody and just grieve over something that you need addressed, right? And being able to discuss business and operations and have an input into where and development, this would be great if it could do this, right? Like those are all very important to us. Um, and obviously the technology actually has to work, but that relationship is really key, and we look for that as one of the key drivers when we do due diligence.
Yeah, it is a one of I would say the main differentiators between Enable and kind of our competitors, right? Like, um, I make myself pretty exclusive and available to our partners.
Mhm.
I'll give you a prime example. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, doing some videos for our marketing team, and a partner called me on my cell phone because of put my cell phone on my emails, and he looked me up and called me, and he was in a very tough situation with one of his employees, one of his administrators, um, and he needed me to effectively, to cut to the chase, he needed me to shut down his server. Um, so while I would never typically do that, I had such a good relationship with this particular individual that I knew that I could go ahead and get that done for him. So it's one of those things where when things hit the fan, you definitely have, that ability, right? So I think that's a good key point. And while that is not necessarily a technology, it is definitely part of the process of determining technology, right? There's people behind technology. Cool. Can you give me an example where in central, kind of the in central data, the ability to get things out, kind of changed a security decision or helped you? I've worked with you, maybe not recently, but historically on some uh, data aspects, specifically around Power BI. Can you talk a little bit about that part? Because that is a major piece of, I think, how Omega does things. And I would say that's almost, I would also say that's one of the major differentiators that I think you do that maybe a lot of other MSPs aren't doing.
Yeah, we try to be as proactive as possible, where we can. And so having a system that has all of the information in it, um, like prime example, rewind, the clock back, like log4j, when that whole fiasco was going on, like
I remember.
what do you do? How do you find it? Like, who has it? It's not something simple like, oh, this version of Adobe needs to be updated, right? And you handle that through third-party patch management. Like, yeah, now we got to figure this out. And so, we made a script in Central. We captured the information, we wrote it to a data field, and then we audited that. And we talked to our customers like, hey, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but the world is burning down about this thing called Log4j. We found you have these old versions. We need to contact your vendors about getting software updates. Like this needs to be addressed as a priority, right? And so
Mm.
being able to be proactive about those things. We do a lot of custom scripting to capture that kind of information, like all the firmware updates that needed to be happen. We pull that in through SNMP on the monitoring side of things through N-Central. Um, any one of those flavors of the month of what needs to be addressed, because the information is in there in one place, we can get that data pull out of it, whether it's proactively making a monitor and a self-healing action to just go fix it automatically, or just getting the data to give to the account managers to get something scheduled to perform a remediation if it's going to be business impacting. Like that's a pretty routine task for us. Even, I mean, at Windows 10, again, prime example, like if you haven't already had those conversations with a client for the past year about replacing those machines, why do they need to be replaced? You know, what is the timeline? What is the impact and the scope of that going to be for a client? Like we pull that on a daily basis and we give that to the account managers of like, here's the progress, for each client. And then here's what's going to be left. And then, do we need to get proposals out for hardware replacements? Because, you can drive some revenue with that, those kinds of things.
Awesome, awesome. And only because we're getting a little short on time, if you could quickly summarize what other technology has been instrumental for Omega, and that can be enable or maybe even just do a shout out. Like what has been kind of maybe an Omega game changer along the way?
Yeah, so the I kind of talked about this before, but the ability to present risk to a client versus just those individual pieces. So we have a software platform that we use that does that for us. So we use Enable to deploy that agent, but then we manage that through this platform that captures all that data. So it's capturing vulnerabilities, internal, external on the network. The data discovery component is huge. Like your security onion, we need to be able to find out where all the data is, right? So typically when we deploy the system and we give that first report, it's like the jaw drops and it's like, ooh, we found this customer. They had 25 total employees and they had like $2.7 billion worth of data liability. And they're like, where? And so we use our cloud-based ERP. Well, guess what? Every time you click the link, it downloads it to your downloads folder. And now you've got 3 years worth of spreadsheets with social security numbers sitting all in it, right? And so
Wow. Okay.
so, but again, that drives business process. So we use Enable to create a script that removes everything out of the downloads folder that's older than 7 days. And so like that was a great thing to watch that liability go away, over the course of like 2 or 3 days, literally like over $1 billion worth of risk just disappeared by a script. Like
Amazing. Okay,
that's
cool.
the kind of thing that you need to be really talking about and looking about with clients is pulling those pieces together, converging those to make an actual informed representation of the information.
Awesome, awesome. And we're gonna do one last poll here. What's the most important when in selecting a convergence platform? Let's just ask the audience here really, really quickly. Polls, and let me come down to the last one here. Launch. Is it automation capabilities? Is it real-time visibility? Is it ease of integration? Or is it cost, right? I would say for the most part, RMMs are generally very affordable. It's a very competitive market. Um, I had a MSP tell me that our agent costs were too high, and I said, based on that agent cost, that is basically a bag of chips per month. So for endpoint. So when you put things in like kind of real world scenarios, perspective is kind of everything. So, that being said, 50% have chosen automation and 50% have chosen real-time visibility. Now, we're going to summarize this really quickly because there are some key takeaways. And while I would love to just read the screen here, what I want to hear from Rick, because obviously you're our special guest today. And I want to kind of, without going into reading the screen, if you could pick people, process, or technology, one, what would you recommend an MSP who's now transitioning into a security provider focus on first? And what would be a key takeaway for you?
Hands down, find the right people first. Like if you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter how good your process or your technology is. If you don't have the people behind it to manage it, man it, and react to it, doesn't matter.
Awesome.
That was
Perfect.
an easy one. That was the
Wow.
easiest slide of the whole thing.
Oh, I know, right? This is amazing. I'm going to open it up to the floor here. Let's see. Let's see if there's any questions. I'm sure there is. Give me one second here. Oh, here it is. What is the minimum viable reporting set you review every week? Like what reports do you review, Rick, on a weekly basis?
Yeah, so for smart secure clients, we've created a weekly report that comes with all of the different kind of pieces and components in it. And so that covers like the network security part of it with VPN logins, data ingress, egress, suspicious IPS detections, like those kinds of things. But then also from the EDR platforms, we're looking at some of those components as well. So stale user accounts, failed logins, reviewing those kinds of things to help keep, I'll say, identity hygiene clean is paramount now, especially when you're exposing your entire login mechanisms to the internet with like
Right.
Entra as an example, right?
Yes.
So making sure that your identity hygiene is clean and reviewed on a weekly basis.
Awesome. Cool. That was the only question. I had hoped that Stephanie was going to ask us a question because I know she is very deep in these particular topics. Now, that being said, I did want to do a shout out because Stephanie Hammond is not only my colleague, but also one of my friends. And she spends her entire career kind of working through kind of the sales and marketing, but also the IT operation and the security operation convergence. So, thank you everybody for joining. My name's Jason Murphy, head nerd for Enable. Rick, uh, obviously, thank you so much for joining today. Amazing job, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and obviously joining with us. Um, Perfect. Um, Great job, Rick, and that's a wrap. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Have
Have
a
to say
great
on
one.
next you as well, and see you on the next webinar.